This is From Anxiety to Love Radio, the show about undoing anxiety through A Course in Miracles and other pathways of love. Gain insights and tools to deepen your awareness of the peace that already exists within you. I'm your host, Corinne Zupko, author of the award-winning and best-selling book, From Anxiety to Love. Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of From Anxiety to Love Radio. I am so excited to have again on the show my sister from another mister, Miss Emily Bennington. Emily, welcome.
Oh, you are a sister. Hi, Corinne.
I was kidding around before that we actually have the same father, as we all do.
Yeah, everyone has the same father.
But I am just so thrilled. Emily is a dear friend of mine. She is the author of the book Miracles at Work, the executive director of the Circle of Atonement. And we have a lot to say today on anxiety and depression. We are joining together at the end of this month. It'll be Saturday, June 29th, for a celebration of healing. We'll be talking about a course-based approach to anxiety and depression at the Center for Remembering and Sharing in New York City. And today we thought it would just be so much fun to join around this topic and talk about the celebration that comes with the fact that healing is guaranteed. Are you so excited to talk about this?
I do want to acknowledge you, Corinne, for bringing the celebratory aspect to this, because when we were originally talking about this topic, we were kind of lost in the angst of anxiety and depression. And just when you're in it, it can be, the lows are pretty low. And I just remember you were like, no, it's a celebration because healing is certain, and let's bring that into it. And so it's going to be a lot more fun than it would have been otherwise. And so I just thought that was brilliant. So you're so right. Healing is certain.
Thank you. With maybe some surprise dance parties, right?
Well, yeah. Dance breaks. Doesn't everyone have those?
Always when we talk about anxiety and depression. Come on.
Dancing is a cure for anxiety.
Right? I joke around that I have a fitness trampoline, and I joke around with my students that I found the cure for depression. You cannot be sad when you're jumping on a trampoline. It's just impossible.
You can also not be sad when you are dancing around your living room with a song turned up to 11,
Yeah, so true. It's so true. So, wow. Well,
been there, done that.
Been there, done that. Totally. I'm wondering, if we should start, let's actually begin. I like personal examples. I like diving right into how this has affected us. And I know both of us have erred more on the anxious side than the depressed side in our journey, but I certainly had bouts of, feeling really down. I'm wondering if we could start, if you would be willing to share some of your experiences with anxiety or depression.
Yeah. So the very first time that I remember anxiety being highly present in my life is during college. I suffered from a eating disorder, compulsive overeating, and I don't mean like, oh, I had a cookie. I mean like 3,000 calories a night, working out feverishly the next day. Got to a point a couple times where I couldn't even sit down, or I sat down like a pregnant woman. It was so full. I was out of control. And the root cause of that was anxiety, fear for the future. So I was graduating from college, didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And that fear manifested in self-sabotage. Mm-hmm. So that was the first experience. Happy to say that I found the course, and that's what healed me from that. I haven't been plagued by those issues in years. But I'm also, to be perfectly honest with you, I am in the middle of a separation right now. And so when you're separating from a spouse, that creates a tremendous amount of anxiety, and also trying to lead the Circle of Atonement too. So this small organization that is growing. And so, you have, how do you show up in the world doing the things that you need to do while dealing with, very real problems? And so one thing that we were talking about prior to hitting record is how much of anxiety shows up in these issues. Like an eating disorder is a specific issue, and then you heal, and then it kind of goes away. But then there's this like dormant, latent anxiety that we just is like the dull hum of life. And how do you address that? So, yeah, I mean, I guess I can say that there have been anxious flare-ups, but then there's also this just state of anxiety that we live in because we tend to live in a state of fear.
I'm really glad that you brought up this idea of there being this like latent anxiety, this sort of undercurrent that even if like the big issues get healed here or there, I kind of think about how I talk about in my book that leaky pipe. Like if you're healing one thing and focus on one thing, but not getting to the core of the cause of anxiety, which is our belief in separation from God, anxiety is just free to pop out in some other leak in that pipe, even if it goes away in one particular, way. And so this idea of this sort of dull hum is really fascinating to me because I feel like when people hear my story, because I'm sure most people watching this have heard my story before, I too had very significant anxiety that began in childhood, but that really exploded when I was in college. People hear that and maybe they don't have that same level of anxiety. But if we sort of tone it down a bit and look at the lower end of the continuum, we can see anxiety popping out for all of us in many different ways. Maybe it's the urge to use food to change our mood if we're starting to feel stressed or anxious. Maybe it's an inability to sit still or like a compulsion to feel like you always have to be busy. I always joke around with my husband because one of our neighbors is always doing something, like always very active. And I'm like, oh, I think that's anxiety. I mean, I'm joking around, but kind of not really, that like I feel like it's anxiety driven a lot of the time. So this idea of this dull hum reminds me about how there have been a number of people who have felt called to read my book. They haven't had that panic attack level of anxiety, but upon reading it, they're like, Corinne, like I realized like this issue or that issue that I have in my life, wow, it's anxiety. Like this shows up for me in my own way, but in a much more subtle form. And that's where I feel like it's so important for us to be so aware of our thoughts, honest with spirit, because if we're brushing things under the rug and not noticing them and bringing them to the light, they just kind of still fester and linger and hang around, right?
Mm-hmm. And if you're associating anxiety with fear of the future, at what point can you ever say, well, that's not going to happen to me? There is no way that you can say, well, this isn't going to pop up in my life again, because life circumstances are always shifting. Mm-hmm. And so it's really a matter of what are you putting your faith in? Mm-hmm. Are you putting your faith in the circumstances and the situations that are always shifting? Or are you putting your faith in God, spirit, connection, source that doesn't change? And so if you put your faith in the things that always change, well, that's a really fragile place to live. Mm-hmm. And it manifests in all of this anxiety that we see. And I know that sounds, really spiritual, and that sounds like I have it all together, but I mean, I know a lot of your anxiety issues resulted from hypochondria. Mm-hmm. And all this, it's funny because like all of a sudden I am worried about being sick, and I keep I'm like, where is this coming from? This hasn't been part of my experience too much. Never go to Google for any symptoms, as you well know. But that hasn't really, the fear of getting sick hasn't been part of my experience. And so I think part of the process of getting to the root of anxiety, obviously, is not just getting lost in it, but figuring out where it's coming from. Mm-hmm. So the more layers that I kind of looked at, why are you so afraid of getting sick? It's oh, the separation means that you lost your health insurance. And so and that's where anxiety can be really sneaky, because it wasn't the forefront thought. Emily, your health insurance is connected to your husband, so you're going to have to work around this in your new life. It was just a fear of being sick. And it's on us, like the onus is on us to really be like, okay, well, dig down, what's really going on there. And that's the level at which you can address it and change the thinking. Because that's what anxiety is, as you know, is just out of control. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, we can get into that.
Oh, that's really, really good. It really makes me think, too, about how when we are committed to doing this inner work and to healing and to turning to God and to performing miracles and undoing fear, that I always think about how that threatens the ego. And so I picture it as like, okay, I'm not getting your attention. The ego's like, I'm not getting your attention through this means anyway, because, anymore, because you've moved on. It's not hooking you. So maybe I can get your attention here. Maybe I can hang this little piece of bait in front of you, and maybe I can get you back focusing on me now that these circumstances have shifted. And, it's like another hook. Mm-hmm. But it's so important, as I always say, to not ever look at any of these things as regressing or moving backwards. It's just that additional layer that's coming up to be healed, because I know that you, like me, are so committed to this pathway and to healing that that does threaten the ego thought system.
Well, the ego's peak experience is your suffering. So whatever it's going to take for you to turn your attention from resting in God to focusing on the body, getting that myopic point of view of it's just about my body identification, well, then the more you do that, the more anxious and fearful you're going to be. And so if you can recognize that as an ego trap, then you're more likely to pull yourself out of it. But it requires you to transcend the ego thinking. And when you're kind of spinning in the thoughts of fear, it's really hard to see your way out. Mm-hmm, so
let's talk there for a moment about spinning in those thoughts of fear. And I'm wondering if anything comes to mind for you in terms of what you do to interrupt that spin. Because I know for me, I've found that having some kind of interruption, having something, so let's say, I'm trying to think of what happened the other day. I got really overwhelmed about something. Oh, I know what it was. I was being asked by someone to do some planning, like some serious planning for what my next 6 months are going to look like. And I had a ton of resistance arise because I felt like, no, like I need to receive the guidance on what that's going to look like. I can't come up with that on my own. And it distressed me so much to try to even do that when I felt like I couldn't. It has to come from a place of guidance.
Which is the bane of any project manager working with anyone in the spiritual space. I've been there, sister. I'm like, well, I've got to ask. And my project manager's like, oh my God. They're like, totally. So mad.
I needed to sort of get out of that funk that I felt like I got into. I needed an interruption. I talk about this idea of having an interruption with a friend of mine. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about what those interruptions are, how you get out of that spin. For me, it might look like lately, because we've had beautiful weather in New Jersey, so I've been getting out a lot and going on long walks. That might mean I open up my course book and do some reading. I might call somebody, something to interrupt that spin. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts to share about that.
Oh, I have all kinds of tools. But right now, my practice is I'm doing 2 weeks on lesson 109, I rest in God. And so every morning I get up and I read it, and it starts my day in a more grounded place. If I'm finding that I'm in a place of temptation where my peace is threatened, the workbook has all kinds of response to temptation practices. The one that I'm doing right now is, and this is based in the workbook too, I do a meditation that you inhale, exhale, and for me, you're supposed to find the image that works for you. For me, the ocean waves work. Mm-hmm. So if I'm inhaling, like the ocean going in, exhaling, ocean coming out, and I think about this. I forget exactly where it is in the workbook, but it's this concept that your thoughts are nothing more than a stick being thrown by a child in the ocean. The stick floats, but it has no effect on the power of the ocean itself. And so it helps me to think about my thoughts as just that stick, and the universe, God, as the ocean. And it's just, if I sit and I breathe with that long enough, usually the anxiety tends to melt away. But I'm also a fan of taking a walk. Like, sometimes you just have to move. You have to dance around your living room. Sometimes you have to take a walk. Sometimes you have to call a friend. You're on my speed dial for those. So for me, it's pausing. It always starts with stopping. So stop, recognize, make the space. And there have been many times lately, where I've just been like, oh, that's it. I'm stopping right now. And I go right into my book. And I've read lesson 109, like 3 times a day at one point, just because you just need to hear it, and something in it fills you up. Something in you recognizes it as truth, and it has a calming effect on me.
That's beautiful. I would love to kind of stay with, you sort of hinted at this already, but I want to draw it out. One of the things in preparation for this workshop that we're doing together on June 29th, you wrote the phrase, "Are you going to rest in the world or rest in God?" And this ties right into, this lesson that you are working with, but I'm wondering if you can say a few things about that.
Yeah. Well, I'm really struck by the idea, and I have to give credit where credit is due to Marianne Williamson, and I forget exactly how she phrased it, but it's this idea that we exercise our muscles so that we can have the stamina and the strength to move through the world. And spirituality is about exercising attitudinal muscles so that we can be still. And the idea is that there is real strength and real wisdom in stillness, but it's more than that from my own experience. It's that when you're still, the guidance comes through, and it's that guidance that changes you on a internal level. But what's fascinating to me now is that I'm seeing the more I get still and the more I come back to the practice, the more external situations are changing too. And so I think what causes a lot of our anxiety is that need for control, that we think we're the ones who are going to decide what is the best external condition for us. And a lot of our suffering comes from trying to orchestrate the events to be what we want them to be. But the practice is coming back to that stillness. And if you take care of getting yourself in alignment with resting in God, then it's an amazing thing to watch how things just kind of work out externally in response to that, in ways that you couldn't have predicted and planned, but it's of God.
So I have an example to share about that. And while I'm sharing this, I'm wondering if you can share some examples too, specifically about how from that stillness, you start to see external situations change. I'll share a quick example. And I was actually I was preparing to interview Robert Perry for the Presenter Series program. And we were going to be talking about vision. And it wasn't really a topic that I was connecting to. My only question for him that I could think of for a 1-hour interview was, what is vision? Like, that was it.
You actually could have asked that and he would have rolled for an hour.
True.
So you really would have set yourself up fine if you just asked that one.
That's very true. But in what I kept doing, instead of trying, because in trying to come up with questions, nothing was coming forward. So in a way, I kind of just went back to that stillness and that space of just trusting that this was going to unfold perfectly. And what was so interesting, what happened was that it was as if my circumstances arranged themselves for me to have an experience of vision. I felt moved to go for a very long walk. I also simultaneously felt moved to read his, I think it was only a 7-page article. And I did something I never usually do, and I printed out the article to read the article while I was walking. So literally I like read, a couple sentences, absorbed them as I looked around, read some more. And in doing so, in reading the article, it brought me into a state of feeling love for everything. People, plants, the pathway, the stones, the water, everything that was around me. And afterwards, I was like, I need to ask Robert. I just have always interpreted that, because I have that experience often when I go on these walks. I need to ask him if that was not the full bells and whistles kind of vision, but like on a smaller, scale. And he was like, absolutely. So there, all of a sudden now, I had an experience to draw from and really then connected with the topic, and the questions flowed, the whole interview flowed. And to me, it was just such a beautiful example of how we are never without guidance. And when we come from this place of stillness, just like you said, things show up in the external world to support that choice for stillness. So I'm wondering if you have something to share too.
I know. And what I love about your story is that you didn't have to go on your walk like willing this experience of vision. It came in response to your willingness to be open to what vision is. Mm-hmm. Like you created a space and the vision came in. And I'm sure Robert said in the interview that vision is a rather common spiritual experience, and I'm so thrilled that you had it. I've never had the bells and whistles experience either, but at the same time, how appropriate and how of God that you would have that right when you needed it.
Right. It is so appropriate and so of God. And just to make one other point about that, in that place, when we have experiences of just really seeing that love in our brothers and feeling filled with that love, feeling it, seeing it everywhere, anxiety and depression cannot exist in that space. It's impossible. So these are the types of experiences that all of these tools from the course are leading us to have, to show us that this state, when we get into these states of depression or anxiety, they're states that aren't real. They're not who we are, and they can fall away.
Yeah, and your experience on your walk reminds me of a line in the course where it says something like, everything was leaning forward to bless me. And when you're on a walk and you feel that, then how can you not feel supported by the universe? And it's hard to be anxious about the things that you don't know when you're just in a space of real presence, feeling supported by everything that's around you, including the rocks and the trees and the stones. So it's one of those things that kind of sounds ridiculous if you just say it, if you haven't experienced it. But once you've experienced, you're like, yeah, I know that. Mm-hmm. But you asked about a specific situation where in my own life, external situations have worked out. And I feel like, how much therapy do you want me to go on this podcast? But I will say this, because I think that this is something that many students who embark on a spiritual path relate to. When I got really, really serious about the course and this practice, it changes you. It changes you in so many ways. And it changed me in ways that my husband and I were kind of like missing each other. He's on his own path, but our conversations were starting to fall flatter, and we weren't in alignment about where it is that we were going. And so when I brought up that, I'm not sure that we're going to make it, because we're not grounded on the same foundation anymore. Obviously our children, but beyond that, when the children move out, what do we have? Mm-hmm. And so he was very, sort of taken aback by that at first. And then as I started to show up in these conversations with him from a place of, what is it that we're going to save? We are going to save the love. We are going to save our family. I am not going anywhere. You are not going anywhere. This is a lifetime commitment. This is a lifetime partnership. The form may change, but the content of the love will never change. And the more we both started showing up from that place, the more his whole outlook shifted. I actually, like, one day he was like, I'm so confused. And then moving forward, he was like, yeah, I absolutely see that this is the way that it needs to be. And I'm so grateful that we still have the bond that we have and that we're not going anywhere in each other's lives. But what's really interesting in this, Corinne, is that the more willing he was to stay in the content of the love and let go of the form, the more space for his own experiences. And my ex-husband is not someone, he doesn't suffer fools lightly. He doesn't, like, he's not a course student. He's never cracked open the book. He's not, but he has had, and I won't share them, but he has had 3 or 4 really profound spiritual experiences that have happened, that have pointed him in the direction of this is what's meant to be.
Wow.
And I couldn't have done that for him. Mm-hmm. God did that for him to be like, yeah, this is what's meant to be. And because of that, he's just absolutely shifted. We have dinner together 6 nights a week. I mean, we are the picture of conscious uncoupling. Our kids are actually out of town, but we had dinner together last night. So, I mean, yeah, it's kind of amazing how God works.
I remember, I think we were texting and we talked on the phone briefly and you said you two were about to go out to dinner and I was like, oh, okay. That's amazing.
I mean, it's phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal. And I just really, I credit the stillness that I was talking about earlier. There was no shaming, no blaming, none of that. It was like, what are we going to preserve here? We're going to preserve the love. And the more we aligned around that, the more everything in the external just worked out.
And again, what an antidote for anxiety and depression, to come from that place of stillness, to come from that place of love, to be focused on the content and be willing to let the form shift and change as it may need. Because if you think about it, everything, you hinted at this before, everything in this world changes. Nothing that we see with our body's eyes stays the same. And if we're putting our faith there, if we're turning to that which is wholly unstable for stability, of course we're going to feel anxious. Of course things are going to get messed up and we might, feel depressed. But when we are instead turning to the content, just like you so beautifully said, that love, the truth, that changelessness, that is our solid ground to stand on. And again, as we have those experiences, and I love what you just shared about your ex-husband, that he's had his own experiences to stand on, that have helped him in trust and seeing that this is okay. Again, how can anxiety and depression exist in that space? It can't.
I know. Fear is a sign that you're trusting in your own strength, I mean, and I just, since I'm throwing around course quotes, I also think about the one that says there's a way of living in the world that is not here, although it seems to be. And I think that's what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. You go through the world and you live your life every day, but you're here, but you're not here. Mm-hmm. And those who walk as you do recognize their own, that's when people kind of show up. I know I kind of probably butchered that quote, but I mean, you are absolutely in my life as a gift, I know. And I've had all kinds of angels that have shown up throughout all of this. And so it's one of those like reminders of if you just step back and let him lead the way, then things work out better than you could have imagined. They won't work out exactly as you imagine, but they certainly will work out better than if you'd had tried to grasp at control.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Your story is just such an example, I feel like, of how healing is certain. And I can relate in, my own life with family relationships getting healed and having long-standing challenges in some of these relationships. And through continuously doing this type of this work, I mean, not this type of work, the course, these tools, really diving into this wholeheartedly, the healing that I'm experiencing in my relationships is just, I don't even have words for just how beautiful it is and how grateful I am. So,
and you're a healer, Corinne. I mean, you're a teacher. And so what would you be teaching if you were so caught up in the circumstances of the world and your own life and your relation? It's only you being able to bring in the love, even if you don't sort of feel it. You bring in your course practice to break up what it is that you're feeling, to remove the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. And I mean, you couldn't be the healer and the teacher that you are if you were stuck resting in the world.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Same, sister. Same.
Yeah.
That's why I just also feel like it's just so beautiful that you're able and willing to talk about your conscious uncoupling process, that's happening, because 50% of marriages end in divorce. This is not something that you're experiencing, that you're the only person experiencing. There's a lot of people who are going through this who, that's a major life transition. And to be meeting this with such grace and love is just really inspiring. And
I don't want to give everyone the impression that we're just kind of like floating through this and everything's magical and blessed and graceful. It really, I mean, it has been like that as far as our interpersonal actions, only because, and I think this is really, really important, we came to an agreement where it was like our relationship, any interactions that we have, is sacred space. So I am not going to bring my judgment, my blame, criticism into this sacred space. And I just kind of love that, because it's the Circle of Atonement section of the course. And so it sort of ties into the circle where I work. And I really love the idea that no matter what, this between you and me, and it's true with like anyone, any brother, any son of God, this is sacred space. And we are going to look at the things we need to look at. We are not going to be in denial. We are going to deal with it, but we are going to deal with it with love.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. That's awesome. And what you just said about coming into a sacred space with no judgment, no blame, or no criticism, that's such a ripe area for us to do some digging and some work. And like, these are the types of things, again, our workshop together is a celebration. We're going to do some challenging work, but at the same time, we're not staying in the challenging, dark places. We're coming out of it. We're moving people through the deep work into the light and into the love. And so one question that folks listening can reflect upon is, if you think of a challenging relationship or a challenging situation, whatever that situation may be, where am I judging? Where am I blaming? And where am I criticizing? Because I will tell you that keeping those thoughts in mind, I've had experiences where, honestly, I don't have bad days anymore. Stuff might happen. I don't label it as a bad day anymore. It's just a lesson. It's just something, coming up. But there was one day, and I've shared this story before because it was so clear. Everything I touched broke or dropped, or like nothing in this day was going well. It was as if everything was out of sync, down to the detail of, we planted peach trees last year, and to my surprise, I've been so excited about these peach trees. I've committed peach theft, where I've, in our town, there's a peach tree. It's hanging over the sidewalk, and I've taken a couple peaches and then gotten home and been like, oh no, the peach police are gonna come get me. But
I take back everything I said about you being a
I've been so excited, and
you're a thief.
The same day, a squirrel knocked off every single green peach on our peach tree. Like nothing. I wasn't going to have a peach last season. And I was like, what's going on? And being open to question, okay, where's their judgment or blame or criticism? I realized that I had been 2 days prior, there was a political situation happening at that time of year, last year, that I didn't agree with in our country. And a number of people that I know did agree and support it. And I judged them harshly. And that was the beginning of almost like sitting on, I like using the image of sitting on a banister and like sliding down a spiral staircase into an ego basement. It was like I made one choice for judgment and hung on to it. And then before I knew it, the next thing I was like solid down in the ego's basement. Everything was going wrong. I was getting so frustrated. But there, again, the radical honesty kicked in, and I was able to see this decision to judge was brought to my mind, and I immediately brought that to the Holy Spirit and was willing, for the Holy Spirit to undo all the consequences of my wrong decision. And after I got to that point, things leveled out again. All that crazy out of sync stuff stopped happening, and this is the work. Like, this is the work in every moment.
Yeah. And it takes a lot of self-awareness to say, how am I bringing this about? Where am I holding those scraps of meanness? Because simple projection, we want to say that we're at the fact of everyone else's scraps of meanness, and so I think that's really a heart of the practice, is coming back to, okay, well, and based on your mood. So I'm feeling this way because I'm harboring some kind of grievance or judgment or resentment or hate. And one of the things that gets me out of that is the Course is very clear that when you hold on to judgments, you are costing yourself guidance and your function. Mm-hmm. And I am somebody who, we want that guidance, right? We want to have that guidance come through. We want to have that love come through, but it can't if it's blocked by your hate and your judgments, even if they're tiny, Mm-hmm. And so I think about that a lot, that I genuinely feel, I believe in the celestial speed up. Mm-hmm. I think the world is going backwards, and that it's up to everyone to grab a flag and go forward. And part of going forward is being an ambassador for God in the world, which means being an ambassador for love, light, and strength and healing. Mm-hmm. And you can't do that in a place of hate or judgment. And so I take that really, really seriously, that God has put us here to be a light, and you snuff out your own light. Mm-hmm. If you're holding a grievance. And but it all comes back to that self-awareness. You have to see what you're doing before you can fix it.
Yeah, it's so true. And I mean, this is serious work, and yet at the same time, I've experienced it as being so gentle and so much fun. Like, to see the changes in my own life through this work, one of the things that I still honestly pinch myself because I just spoke at a conference in England, so I had to get on a plane. To be on an airplane, for me, to be on an airplane with no anxiety, and I am not exaggerating, even when turbulence happens, of course, I'd rather not be bumped around.
Jostled about.
Yeah, but my anxiety used to spike from 0 to 100 at the tiniest sensation of turbulence. And I remember talking to a girlfriend in graduate school because she had no issues flying. And I was like, how do you have no issues? She's like, I don't know. I just love it. When there's turbulence, I see everybody's head just bopping up and down. And I remember thinking, that will never be me. And for that now to be me, for me to be able to be on a plane and so excited to be on the plane and so excited to be going to where it is that we're going, and to feel so supported and just in that state, it makes me so happy. And that's why our joining with this workshop that we're doing is a celebration, because when we have these moments of these experiences that we've talked about, these recognitions of how we've changed, of the fears that have fallen away, oh my gosh, it's just the most exciting thing ever to see and to realize, why in the world did I ever defend against this?
I know.
This is so good.
What's exciting to me is when you're talking about what it is to be on a plane now, and you're like, I didn't have any sense of anxiety, but you don't know how that happened, right? And so it's just such demonstration that God really will take the next step for you. Mm-hmm. So it's your willingness to say, I turn this over, or to break it up with some prayer, from your practice or whatnot. But if you do that, if you just give that little willingness, then you can have these shifts and you don't know how it happened. You just know that it did. And you're feeling like so peaceful about it. Mm-hmm. And I just think that seeing that promise that God made come true, mm-hmm. that something has just been completely removed, that was there before, it's not there now. And I can't get enough of that because mm-hmm. I've seen it so often that it's just like, yeah, we are so supported. We are so supported.
And I love hearing other people's stories. Like when I hear you describe everything that you've shared, when I hear other people talk about their healings, it helps all of us. It's not just, my experience is not just a block in my new foundation of trust. That's an experience that as I share it, others hear it. It's for their new solid foundation of trust as well. I feel like we're all in this together and learning together. And that's why it's so much fun for me to come together in person and do this type mm-hmm. of searching and experiencing and, just joining together. It's just so incredibly powerful.
Because there's only so much fun you can have with a solo dance break.
Exactly.
You got to have your peeps for that.
You totally do. Oh, this has been so much fun. Emily, I'm wondering, is there anything else that you feel moved to share before we wrap up?
I feel like we've covered it all. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that it's just the whole concept of anxiety coming from trusting in your own strength is really just something that sits with me. Because if you're not trusting in your own strength, then there is no reason to be anxious or afraid. And I recognize how much easier that is said than done. Mm-hmm. But that's the practice, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's where we get into the discipline of it. Mm-hmm. And how are you spending your mornings? And how are you, interacting with people? And how are you treating, your intrapersonal thoughts are causing your interpersonal interpersonal behaviors. And I'm just really excited to go deeper into all of that with you mm-hmm. at the end of this month in New York, and to give you a big old hug and to see who shows up and just have a good time and celebrate healing because it is certain.
Yes. Yay. Amen. Oh, everyone, I hope you will join us in New York City on Saturday, June 29th for a celebration of healing. A course-based approach to anxiety and depression will be at the Center for Remembering and Sharing in New York City. You can find out more through the link from anxietytolove.com/events. And Emily, do you know the circle? Is it circleofa.org/events? Is that your URL?
Yeah, you can go to circleofa.org/NYC to get to this one.
Okay, perfect. That's the direct link, /NYC. Beautiful. Thank you, Emily, so much. I cannot wait to see you. So I can't wait to see everybody else too. I'm going to be giving so many hugs.
I know. I can't wait.
Yay. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. If you benefited from this episode of From Anxiety to Love Radio, someone else you know can benefit too. The biggest compliment you can give is to share about the show on social media and to leave a review on iTunes. Thank you so much for doing so. I read every single review. Now, if you are ready to take your inner work to the next level, pick up my book, From Anxiety to Love, anywhere books are sold, and sign up for my free crash course on undoing anxiety with A Course in Miracles. It's available at FromAnxietyToLove.com/crash course. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you on the next episode.